Has this ever happened to you? You give yourself to a man, not just your body, but your softness, your laughter, the fire behind your eyes, and afterward, he says something that stops time. Not a compliment, not a thank you, but something deeper, something that betrays the fact that he's no longer untouched by you, a slip of the tongue, a quiet confession, a sudden vulnerability that wasn't there before. This is the moment he becomes tethered, not to your skin, but to your essence. In the silent aftermath of closeness, a man's words reveal what no action can. When the masks have melted with sweat, when the ego relaxes in the warmth of post-pleasure vulnerability, this is when the psyche speaks. And if he utters certain phrases, even casually, he's no longer free. He is bound, not by force, but by archetype. He has met the anima. Carl Jung knew this. The anima, the feminine image within the male unconscious, awakens through emotional and erotic fusion. And when a man feels he has touched something in you that transcends mere form, something ancient, intuitive and whole, his soul begins to remember what it's been searching for, and yet he may not understand why. His words will falter. He might say something like, "I don't know what this is, but it feels different." Or, "You're not like the others." Or even more subtly, "I feel like I can breathe when I'm with you." These are not compliments. They are echoes from a depth he doesn't yet understand. The modern world has taught women to mistake these moments as validation. But they are not proof of love. They are proof of possession, not of him over you, but of you within him. You've entered his psychic architecture, but here's where many women fall from the throne. Instead of receiving this with quiet dignity, she rushes forward. She interprets his words as a green light to bond, to please, to merge. She floods the space with giving, over-explaining, performing, and in doing so, she slips from her archetype as the mystery into the role of the pleaser, the eternal girl, the one who tries. And just like that, the magic breaks. Do you know how many women are almost unforgettable? They feel the power of their presence after intimacy. They hear the tremor in his voice. They taste the shift in the air. And instead of leaning back into that alchemical silence, they lean in with fear, with need, with too much, because somewhere deep inside they don't fully believe they are enough just by existing. But the woman who knows, who has danced with her own shadow, who has wept on the floor and risen again without waiting for anyone to save her, she doesn't grasp. She watches. She observes the man after the act. She reads the language of his stillness, the way he looks at her like he's trying to memorize her face. She notices the hesitation in his voice, as if he's about to say something real, but stops himself. Because he knows, once it's spoken, it cannot be taken back. What binds a man is not performance. It is penetration, not of the body, but of the psyche. And here is where Stoic wisdom and Jungian depth converge. A woman must learn to be indifferent to outcome, but devoted to truth. To see his emotional tether not as her reward, but as his responsibility. He has been touched, yes, but what he does with that awakening is not hers to control. She is not here to carry his potential. She is not his therapist, his mother, his muse to fix him. She is the mirror, and mirrors don't chase. There are things a man says after intimacy that reveal how far you've reached into him. But to see them, you must not be desperate to hear them. You must become the one who is worth being spoken to with reverence. The feminine that captures a man's soul is never loud. She is not flashy. She doesn't need to ask what she means to him. She already is meaning. And when he says it, when the words slip through his post-intimacy haze, you'll feel it in your bones. It won't be romantic. It will be recognition. There are few moments in a man's life more raw than the minutes following intimacy. The silence, where masks dissolve and the unconscious begins to leak through the cracks. If he says something then, in that still, unguarded space, it was never rehearsed. It came from the well. This is not the domain of charm, this is the domain of truth. You see, the masculine psyche, especially in men who have not yet initiated themselves into full awareness, struggles to name what it feels. But it feels nonetheless, and when a woman embodies the full spectrum of her feminine, the warmth and the wildness, the tenderness and the terror, she becomes to him what the Stoics called fatum, fate, not a woman, a force. And when he meets that force, when she opens to him not as a strategy, but as a sovereign, something ancient stirs in him. It is not lust, it is longing, not desire, but remembrance. He has found the archetype beneath the flesh, and he cannot unsee it, but only if she remains there. If she does not collapse into her wounded need to be chosen, because this is where most women lose the very power they unknowingly evoked. After intimacy, the modern woman has been conditioned to wait for the text, the validation, the promise of something more, but the eternal feminine, the woman of myth, of psyche, of soul. She doesn't wait. She watches, because she knows if the act was sacred, the man will feel it. And if he doesn't, then she was never truly seen to begin with. She doesn't take a man's silence as punishment. She takes it as information. She doesn't interpret his distance as rejection. She understands it as reverberation, the masculine retreating inward to make sense of what just touched him. This is where many women sabotage the bond. They interrupt the silence. They chase. They reach out just to check in. They fill the space with nervous laughter, with selfies, with reassurances. And in doing so, they abort the masculine process of internal integration. They rob the man of his initiation. But the awakened woman knows, if she is the one who stirred something in him, he will circle back. Not as a boy needing more of her, but as a man beginning to recognize himself in her presence. Because when a man says something after intimacy like, "I don't know what this is," he's revealing that he's standing at the edge of his own soul. "You make me feel safe." He's confessing that your energy reminds him of something he never received, not even from his mother. "I don't usually talk this much after." He's admitting that the intimacy wasn't just physical, it breached the walls around his heart. "I feel like I've known you forever." He's unknowingly speaking to the archetypal feminine, the timeless echo of she who remembers. But beware, these words don't mean he's ready. They mean he's touched. And touched is not the same as transformed. It's here the Stoic woman detaches. She doesn't confuse his emotional reaction with a guarantee. She doesn't need it to become anything, because her worth is not up for negotiation. Her power isn't dependent on his choices. She is the threshold. Whether he crosses it is up to him. Some men will run. Some will deny what they felt. Some will distract themselves with other women who feel safer in their superficiality. But others, the rare ones, will come undone. And it's not because of what you did. It's because of who you were being. Because in the end, it isn't your body that binds him. It's the part of you he can't touch, the part that whispered through your eyes, your breath, your silence. The part that said, "I know who I am." Do you? That's what haunts him. That's what he can't forget. That's when you stop being a woman he was with and start becoming the symbol his soul can't stop orbiting. There is something terrifyingly beautiful about a woman who doesn't cling after being touched. Not because she's playing hard to get, not because she's aloof or emotionally unavailable, but because she is rooted, grounded in herself. She doesn't need to ask what it meant to him, because she knows what it meant to her, a moment of presence, of embodiment, of truth. And she doesn't negotiate with truth. In the archetypal dance between masculine and feminine, intimacy is never just physical. It is psychic, symbolic, spiritual. A woman becomes a portal, not to fantasy, but to the forgotten. She's the mirror of what he abandoned in himself long ago: softness, vulnerability, chaos, depth. If he sees her, truly sees her, and speaks something real in the moments after, then he has tasted the sacred. But not every man can hold that frequency. This is the painful paradox. A man can be shaken by a woman and still walk away from her, because to stay would require death. The death of his illusions, his ego, his carefully curated detachment. To stay would require that he become more than what he was before her, and not every man is ready to rise. So what does she do? Nothing. The empowered feminine doesn't try to convert his confusion into clarity. She lets the silence be what it is, the pressure chamber where a man either retreats or resurrects. But make no mistake, if he says those words, the ones that echo deeper than logic, he has been marked. And even if he runs, even if he ghosts, even if he pretends it never mattered, he carries you now. You are the storm he will measure every calm against, the fire behind every safe pair of eyes, the haunting beneath his distractions. And yet, this is not a game. This is sacred work. Too many women use their power as manipulation, trying to bind a man through seduction, through strategy, through suffering. That is not feminine empowerment, that is feminine wounding. The healed woman doesn't need to control the man's reaction. She trusts the architecture of the soul. She trusts that if the connection was true, his path will fold back toward her, not because she chased, but because she remained anchored. This is the lesson of the Stoics. Amor fati, love your fate. Even if he never returns, even if the words he said after intimacy were the last honest thing he ever gave you, let them be enough. Not because he fulfilled something, but because you did. You showed up in your fullness. You didn't shrink, you didn't pretend. You gave without selling your soul, and that, in itself, is victory. Because the true feminine doesn't seek possession, she evokes presence. The woman who stays in her power after intimacy is dangerous to the modern world. Not because she's cold, but because she cannot be consumed. She can be touched, yes, but she cannot be taken. And every man, somewhere inside, aches for her. He aches for the woman who doesn't just give him pleasure, but gives him a glimpse of the divine, and then walks away, untouched by his inability to name it. So when he says those words, the ones that crack through the casual post-intimacy mask, don't cling, don't explain, don't hope, listen. Listen for the soul beneath the sentence. And then, stay still. If he's worthy, he'll find his way back to the place he met himself, in you. What he says after intimacy isn't just a response, it's a reveal. A man's words in that vulnerable twilight, when the fire has settled into embers and his defenses have slipped, come not from thought, but from imprint. You have entered his psyche like a dream he didn't expect to remember. And now even he doesn't fully understand why he's staring at you, as if you hold the key to something he lost in childhood. This is the realm of projection. In Jungian terms, he has projected the anima, his inner feminine, onto you. Not the you who makes coffee in the morning or scrolls through her messages, but the eternal you, the priestess, the sorceress, the mother of the earth and the wild. And when he projects onto you, when he sees in you the lost parts of his soul, he speaks with a tremble in his voice. Because for a brief, unspeakable moment, he feels whole. He may not say, "I love you." He may not even say anything coherent. But he'll say something that vibrates at the frequency of need, not needy dependence, but the ache of a man who has touched something he wasn't sure existed, like, "You calm me. I feel weirdly safe right now. This scares me. It's like I've known you in another life. Pay attention. These phrases are doorways. They are cracks in the masculine shell, and what pours out isn't polished. It's primal. But here's the paradox. He may say these things and then disappear. Because to meet the anima is to face the shadow. And for a man who isn't initiated, who hasn't yet faced his inner chaos, this encounter feels too much like death. Not because of you, but because of what you awaken. The empowered woman doesn't personalize this. She doesn't spiral into questions like, why didn't he choose me, or what did I do wrong? She understands that what he fled from was not her, but the mirror she became. She doesn't try to keep him. She lets the gravity of her truth do what it will. This is the lesson too many forget. Feminine power is not about holding a man. It's about holding yourself so deeply that even his departure cannot unseat you. Let him run if he must. Let him ghost. Let him rationalize the connection away. Because when he says those things, when his words betray that you reached him, they echo far longer than any goodbye. Some men return weeks later, haunted by the quiet way you held space, by the scent of your skin, by the way your eyes didn't demand but knew. Others bury it, only to remember years later when another woman fails to stir what you did effortlessly. This is the feminine mystery. She doesn't leave marks on his back. She leaves them on his soul. But she never begs for recognition. She doesn't post the quote or the selfie hoping he'll see. She simply is, a living reminder of what he touched but could not yet hold. And this is what binds him. Not your love, not your attention, not your effort, but your presence. The way you refuse to collapse, the way you let him witness your softness without trading it for safety. This is what he will measure every woman against. This is what no distraction can erase. Because once a man says those words, even quietly, even once, it's already too late. You're inside him now. He may try to return to his world after you, to the women who don't make him feel exposed, to the casual flings, the predictable patterns, the safe games of shallow attraction. But something is missing now, something he cannot unsee. You've awakened him, not into love but into remembrance. He remembers how it felt to be fully seen and not judged, to be allowed to surrender without shame, to speak nonsense and still be held by your presence. He remembers the sound of his own truth rising unexpectedly in his throat, uncensored. And most of all, he remembers the silence after, the moment when you didn't demand anything, when you didn't scramble for reassurance or fill the space with apologies, or wrap yourself in performance, when you simply existed with that unshakable stillness that made him feel both terrified and safe. This is what makes a man bonded. Not the intensity of your passion, not how good you were, not how much you gave, but your energy after the act, the way you carried yourself, not as someone who was trying to be chosen, but as someone who had already chosen herself. This is rare, uncomfortable, magnetic, and in a world of women who chase affection after surrendering their bodies, the one who waits in her own quiet power becomes unforgettable. He doesn't even know why. He may go days, even weeks, pretending you didn't crack something open, but the image of you lingers. It visits him in the early hours of insomnia, in the soft moans of another woman who doesn't touch his soul, in the mirror where he sees the man he was with you and misses him. Because in your presence, he saw the man he could be, the man who speaks truth, who opens, who isn't afraid of depth, and that version of himself haunts him more than the loss of you. But here's where your test begins. Because the moment you notice he's still watching your stories, or sending half-hearted texts, or orbiting with uncertainty, you'll feel the pull to reach out, to ask, to make it clear. Don't. Let the man who spoke sacred words prove he meant them with sacred action. Let him earn the place he once stood in freely. The throne of your intimacy is not an open seat. It is reserved for the man who can stand in full integrity, not just in bed but in life. This is what separates the women who are remembered from the women who are reclaimed. Because when you can sit with the ache of not knowing, when you can remain sovereign in the absence of clarity, you become more than a memory. You become a mirror. And no man forgets the mirror that showed him who he was becoming. Yes, he may have said something beautiful, something tender, something no one else had ever said, but words are seeds. They mean nothing if they're not watered with presence, action, and consistency. So let him water them, or let the silence become your answer. You've already given him the gift. Now give yourself the space. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do after hearing a man's soul cry out in the dark is not rush to meet it, but to sit in the flame of her own worth and let him rise to meet her. There comes a moment in every empowered woman's life when she realizes she is the initiation, not the fantasy, not the fixer, not the fallback. She is the threshold a man must cross if he is to enter the kingdom of his own soul. And when she gives herself fully, wildly, without manipulation, and he responds with those trembling sacred words in the aftermath, it is not validation, it is revelation. He has seen a glimpse of the divine feminine. He may not know the language for it. He may not understand what he's touching, but he feels it, and he knows, even if he buries it under layers of logic and ego, that he is no longer the same. A man who says, "This feels different," who whispers, "You scare me," who confesses, "I don't know what's happening." He is speaking from a cracked open heart, and yet, this is not your cue to hold him through it. You are not his healer. You are not his map. You are not his bridge between confusion and wholeness. You are the invitation. The true feminine doesn't drag a man toward his transformation. She invites him to rise, and if he doesn't, she lets him fall, without guilt, without bitterness, without clinging to the ruins. Because the woman who walks with her archetypes, the lover, the queen, the mystic, the wild, knows that intimacy is never about transaction. It is alchemy, and she refuses to reduce it to a negotiation. You gave him a moment that echoed through his unconscious. Whether he honors it is not your burden. Whether he returns is not your business. Your business is this: to remain rooted in your radiance, to be unshakable in your stillness, to trust that if his soul was touched, it will either awaken or retreat. But either way, you do not chase. Because when a man says something real after intimacy, he's already showing his cards. The facade has dropped, and what rises in its place is either devotion or defense. Let it be what it is. There is a reason sacred temples were protected. Not everyone was allowed to enter. Only those who approached with reverence, with courage, with readiness. You are that temple now, and you must guard your inner sanctuary not with walls, but with standards. Not every man who speaks beauty is ready to hold it, but the one who is, he won't just say the words, he will become them, day after day, in presence, in truth, in steadiness. Not because you begged, but because you were still. Still enough to become the voice in his mind he couldn't silence. Still enough to become the standard he couldn't forget. Still enough to remind him that love is not performance. It is presence. And presence, when given freely, becomes unforgettable. So if he said something after the moment, and you felt it in your bones, then you know, you reached him. Now let him show you what he'll do with that awakening. Until then, remain unmoved, remain sacred, remain you.